Anelise Chen never intended to become a clam. It all started with a typo. She was going through a difficult divorce. Her career and job security was tenuous. And she just got into a bike accident, leaving her with bruised ribs. And it's at this moment she received a text from her mom. Clam down. Just clam down. The typo of clam, not calm, inspired a journey of healing for Anelise, a journey that included retreating into herself, her family history, and a deep dive into the lives of clams and mollusks, some of the most resilient species on our planet. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. Today, Anelise Chen is with us for the hour. She's the author of Clam Down, A Metamorphosis, and an associate professor at Columbia University. Anelise, welcome to Where We Live.
Thank you so much for having me.
And a reminder for our listeners that if you love bookish conversations, make sure to check out our new newsletter at Where We Read. It's a monthly newsletter for book lovers and the literary curious alike. Find out more on ctpublic.org/whereweread. And you can also join the conversation, 888-720-9677, or leave us a comment on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. So, Anelise, to start, want to set the scene for our listeners. Tell us the origin story of Clam Down.
So, you did such a wonderful job setting it up, by the way. So,
thank you.
And thank you so much for having me. It just started this one day. I started writing it November 2016. A period of time that maybe speaks for itself. As Catherine said, I was going through this divorce. And I just remember one day waking up and I was, I just moved out of my apartment and I was subletting this loft. And, I just woke up, had no idea where I was. I was like, how did I end up here? Like, what is my life? And so naturally, as one does upon waking nowadays, you just kind of, where's my phone? So I picked up my phone and there was that typo from my mom, clam down, clam down. And, as you know, it's probably not the most helpful to say, to tell someone to calm down. But clam down was so funny. And so I kind of just held on to that image. It was like the moment I received that, like something just went off in my head. And, I laughed and instantly it was like I had transformed. I turned myself into this clam character and I could see myself as if from above and it was silly. So I really felt like I could go about my day. So I basically started writing from that perspective, and by December I had a pretty kind of solid draft that eventually became the Paris Review essays. And that was the beginning.
Well, it's pretty amazing that something like that can transform that image into your brain, that you became this clam. Mm-hmm. And we'll, of course, talk more about that throughout this conversation. But how did that image of becoming a clam or being a clam give you a sense of direction and a way forward?
I mean, I don't think I could have done it without Kafka's Metamorphosis because, of course, that framework already existed. Just the thought, a human turning into animal, a woman turning into this creature, that was already there. And so it was sort of like instantly the storytelling part of my brain awoke. And I was like, I can turn this into a story. And so I just skipped right to it. It's like, okay, so if I'm this person who turned into a clam, like what's next, right? And so the first step for me was, I kind of joke about it in the book, but I go to the library to find out more about my true species. So now I'm on this journey to find out more about myself as a clam. And I think there's also just something so intuitive or instinctive about this animal, or like why it was edifying for me. It's a clam has two shells. It closes itself up, and suddenly it's impervious. You just kind of feel like nothing can hurt you. But but this, I mean, this exists in our idioms, right? Like we say when someone can't speak, they're clamming up. We have, when someone's in pain, they retreat into their shell. If they're flourishing, they're coming out of their shell. So like this already very much exists, and so I just really wanted to unpack it a little bit more. Yeah.
Did it take a moment to get into the rhythm writing from this point of view?
It was actually almost like instant. So I fought it obviously in the beginning. So like when I was pitching the Paris Review essays, I definitely didn't tell them like, hey, by the way, I've been disassociating writing about myself as a clam.
So I'm a clam now?
Yeah.
That's going to be my byline instead?
Yeah, I was like definitely going to write it in first person, just in a normal way. But I could feel right away writing it just how it allowed me to capture the voice and the tone and the humor and the distance that I really needed at the moment. It's a way, it's a way to process your pain. Like I needed that scrim and I needed that distance. So it emerged actually quite organically in my writing. So like my writing practice, it goes a little bit something like this. Like I just have like a throwaway document on my computer, and it's where I just put the detritus of my life, like random bits of language and, rants and things I'm just trying to process. Mm-hmm. And so in that document, I noticed that I was already kind of using the third person and using this clam persona. So yeah, I mean, so it both took a moment for me to truly accept that this is what I was going to attempt and be public with, even though it was already like in my private writing, I was already doing it. And yeah, it's a gamble because I was a writer. I needed a job and I didn't want to be too weird, but this is what emerged. So,
and there's so many things there. And I want to, because you say in the book that I think it's from your dad's perspective, and we're going to get into that in a little bit as well, where fear is a gamble. Did you have much fear when you were gambling, becoming a clam and writing your story from the clam's perspective?
Yeah, there's definitely a gamble. So that my dad, I write about this in the book, but he had this very popular self-help book, actually, maybe in the 90s or 80s. It's called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And so that, like now it's just kind of a joke between me and my sister. But so it's like feel the fear and do it anyway. Yeah. And in that moment, I mean, this is like post-divorce and I really felt like I had nothing to lose. So it's like, yes, feel the fear and do it anyway. Just go for it, yeah.
Well, then you went for it, of course, and because like the experience is the experience of divorce and separation is something a lot of people go through, and of course everyone processes it in a very different way. So, was writing always a part of processing for you?
Yeah, writing's always been a part of my processing, and yeah, it's. Like that document I was telling you about too. It's where I go to encourage myself. It's where I go to, yeah. I mean, and I think that's one of the main things about being a writer is that it forces you to attend to the present moment, and you can't, like you have to process it. But the processing of it is actually what's, like the joy of it, because then you're able to transform it into an experience that others can enter and others can experience. And that's the art making, right? So you're taking something that's like amorphous and fleeting and even painful, and you're turning it into this story, and so other people can enter it. I kind of think that's beautiful. So
yeah, well, I mean, because you're conjuring up this image and this story, and I imagine that when people read it, they might find themselves resonating with it a lot, whether or not they've had the same experience or perhaps feel less lonely. Do you find that to be the case?
Yeah, that I hope that's the case, and that's certainly why I read and why I do so much research. It's to feel less lonely. It's to feel less like is I my first response usually is always to go to the library. When I'm going when I need anything, it's like my spiritual place. I go there, and you can go there without even a question, without even an intention, and I just kind of browse, and usually the answer shows itself to me. And when I was searching, what I was searching for with this project was just like I wanted to know, what happened to people when they were in moments of crisis and when they did clam up and retreat into their shell, and when it felt like they couldn't be vulnerable ever again. What happened to them? Like how did they transform back into a human? Like how did they come out again? How did they find their voice again? And I actually found many examples and that I write about in the book. So,
one of my favorite things about going to the library is oftentimes I'm not looking for an answer, but I'm looking for my next book, but I don't know what it is. And I'll sort of let the library tell me. Like one of my favorite things is just grab something, and I'm usually not disappointed by that experience. And of course, as you're in the library, you're looking for answers to questions. And I was really inspired and captivated by your exploration of creativity or creative people, familiar names like Charles Darwin with his research, and Georgia O'Keeffe through her paintings, because she did a series of paintings on clams. So it seems like a lot of these iconic people also spent time clamming, retreating from the world around them and going into solitude and clamming down. So can you tell us, what have you learned from their clamming period? And also realizing that, Charles and Georgia needed clamming down as well.
I know. I mean, they're such household names, and so we don't really associate them with having this clam period, because they both seem so public and so courageous. Trailblazing. So the Georgia O'Keeffe example was, again, it happened by chance. I was on a writer's residency in New Mexico. And really, when you're in New Mexico, you can't escape Georgia O'Keeffe. The whole industry there is kind of built around her. I mean, I say that jokingly, but really, you really can't go anywhere without seeing her paintings. And I didn't really have that much interest in her before, just because I associated her with dentist waiting rooms.
But I wasn't going to say that, but that is so true.
Yeah. But I mean, completely underestimated her. So when I was in New Mexico, I did a little bit more research, just reading about her. And, remarkably, I learned that she also went through this clam phase of her paintings. So even though we know her now, mostly, her exuberantly colored, like flower paintings, before that, so she went through this period where she was really trying to assert her independence and separate from her mentor and her partner at the time, Alfred Stieglitz. And, so she too was going through a little, like, a relationship rupture. And it was during this time, she was like, I need to be alone. She would go away, and she painted this series, this clam series, that were just so muted. It was like black, white, grays, very kind of solemn paintings of clams. Right? Like, and I was like, oh my God, what are the chances she also became a clam? And she would say things like, it's so nice to have the emotional faucet turned off. And that's also how I was feeling. And so, it was really through these clam paintings that she was actually able to become financially independent at that point, from the selling of these paintings. And of course, we know what happened to her. Like, this was a moment of insecurity where she was at a crisis hinge point. And we know that she, sort of asserted her independence. She really came into her own as an artist. And is the legendary kind of Georgia as we know her today. So yeah, that moment of going away and kind of retreating, recuperating felt really important to her. And so that allowed me to think, well, maybe my isolation will not be permanent. You know, it's something that I need right now. I don't know. Should I talk about Darwin too?
I feel like Georgia already covered it all. But I mean, it sounds like it was a very quietly powerful moment for you to realize that she had gone through this. Do you think, having learned about that, and also Darwin as well, having learned that they both kind of gone through this, do you think maybe you were not searching for permission per se, but do you think it opened up something to you where you allow yourself, I can clam down. I need a little clamming time.
Yeah, it's definitely permission and just finding how the story turned out for them, because like when you're in that moment of insecurity and unknowing, that's the primary question, like what's going to happen to me. And so by collecting all these other stories, it was sort of like I was piecing out the possibilities for myself.
Well, then I want to turn to the actual clam themselves. They're very interesting creatures. And in the book, you describe how they carry their homes. They're sedentary creatures and they're hardy creatures. So as you're researching and gathering this knowledge about clams and mollusks and other hard-shell sea creatures, did this offer you a sort of formula for how to endure the time after your separation?
Yeah, one of the first images that came to me, because I really knew nothing about clams when I started writing this, I was like, what is a clam? So of course I go and Google what are clams? And then the first Google results that pop up, it's like, are clams alive? And are clams happy? Because there's so
happy as a clam.
I know they're so like inert, and you're like, is that a rock or is that a creature? Is that a living being? One of the first images that I was like, oh, I remember going to the 99 Ranch Market and like poking them at the seafood station where they're just like heaped in these bins, and I would just like poke them and then they would shut their shells, and I was like, oh, okay, now I can't hurt them anymore. So I started this journey just from there, like a place of total ignorance, thinking of them as food items, not even really aware if they're alive. But all the years of research after, of course, I'm like a mollusk expert now, sort of.
Well, what was that moment like when you realized that they are alive? Because I think for many of us, perhaps the first thing we think of is food.
Yeah.
To be fair, that's what they're known for a lot of things. But what was that moment like when you realized that they're actually living beings?
I mean, it's like, wow, like they have so much dignity, It's like, they really can, they have what they need to protect themselves, which is this shell. And so, yeah, I kind of feel that sometimes, I don't know if this seems like a stretch, but I do feel that sometimes, I don't know, like the stereotype around Asian presenting people, it's like, what's actually going on inside? Like, is there any interiority? It's like we just kind of seem so
closed in.
Yeah, closed, opaque, inexpressive somehow. And so maybe there was something about that I also latched onto. Like, there's so much substance and personality, even though you can't immediately tell.
Well, I think we're going to get into more of that later as well, in terms of perhaps why that stereotype exists. You're listening to New Haven author Anelise Chen, who's the author of Clam Down. She's also an associate professor at Columbia University and will be staying with us for the hour. Listeners can learn more about her book at ctpublic.org/whereweread. You can join the conversation as well. Let us know if you have any questions, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. With us is Anelise Chen. She's an author based in New Haven, and her new book is Clam Down, a Metamorphosis. Told from the point of view of the clam, it's a memoir unlike anything we've read here at Where We Live. And listeners, you can join the conversation, 888-720-9677, or leave us a comment on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. And you can also check out all of our author conversations by visiting ctpublic.org/whereweread. So Annalise, we kind of left off earlier talking about how the clam can be a representation on a person being closed in or protecting themselves, as we will discover reading through your book. And through this process, you also came to realize that your parents have their own clamming process or clamming behavior. Was that a gradual process of learning that, or did you have moments where you thought, oh, wait, is this clamming behavior?
Yeah, I actually, so earlier in the interview, I was talking about going to this residency in New Mexico. And so when I was like, I need their car. So I had this whole plan. I was going to drive home and then drive their car away to go to this residency where I would just be living in total solitude for like several months. And so it was during this trip when I went home, because, I think about my parents, they're not really like at the forefront of my mind every single day. But it was really being home and noticing right away, like how we dealt with conflict, was just to go silent and just go into our corners, and not talk about things. And it was also during this trip home that I was talking to my dad and like suddenly realized that he and this is just the funny way that memory works, but he went away for a decade when I was growing up to write this mysterious piece of accounting software that he called shell computing. And when I realized that, I was like, oh my gosh, like this story is it's so spooky and uncanny. But of course, I didn't get this shell imagery out of nowhere. Like, and if I'm a clam, it's because my dad's a clam and my mom's probably a clam. And then to go even further back, I think my grandma, my grandparents, this has just been how we deal with things. But because he left for a decade, he had this idea that he wanted to write this software and it would be the most secure piece of small business accounting software that ever existed. So he had to do it in solitude by himself, like no help. He was just going to do it all. He just kind of like kept finding these offices that were further and further away from us. And of course, and he eventually ended up in Taiwan. So I was like, okay, I got to go across the ocean to write this program in solitude. And so of course I was a kid then, so it never occurred to me to ask like, what is this retreat about, and what was his experience like, and what were the, of course I knew the stated reasons why he was leaving, but I didn't know the emotional or psychological, sort of reasons. I didn't know at the time that he was really struggling. So because he left, it was really just a blank space in my memory. I don't know how he spent his days. I don't know what he ate. I don't know who he talked to, right? So I felt like I had to try to fill in some of my knowledge and just understand what this whole phase was for him. Because really he hasn't, he slowly retreated further and further away from us. And then I don't know if he ever came back. So, yeah.
Well, because we're talking about your dad, I want to get into the portion of your book where you talk about your dad. You also wrote from your dad's point of view. And because I just want to share that, I really enjoyed those portions because I was hearing my own dad. Like the cadence, the grammar, even the attitude is the same. I texted my mom and she was like, well, that's not very surprising because Taiwanese dads have a special Taiwanese American dad club that they go and hang out. And so they all have the same personality. But like jokingly aside, there's so much personality there. But you had to really dig and find him, right? That's beyond what he's presenting. So what was that like for you? You know, you went with an ask, which he also responded with, oh, my daughter only comes here when she has something she needs. But he also reacts that way out of love.
Yeah, so it was a long research journey for sure. I mean, doing research at the library is so much easier than having to pry your dad open. And so initially, I really tried to avoid it. I mean, I actually didn't. I mean, I wanted to write about him, but I thought maybe I could do it without really interviewing him. But it quickly became apparent that I really did need to talk to him. But it was hard. You know, it's hard. So my dad says over and over, he's like, I've built my whole life around this rule, which is I don't want to feel any emotions. And that really is how he operates. And so for someone like that, how do you get them to re-excavate and to bring all this painful stuff to the surface? I mean, this was a decade of his exile and really like professional failure, right? I mean, this isn't a spoiler alert, but he finishes the program and doesn't sell a single copy of it. And, you know, in a way, the program was just that was his shell, you know, like his isolation was his shell, and it had been completed, and now he could live inside it. So initially I was like very ashamed and didn't know how to really approach him, and I would just sometimes text him random things. And he was like, "What exactly are you trying to get at? Like, I don't want to think about the past. I don't." And then one day I was really stuck with the book because I knew I needed more information from him, and I went home without any plan, and like went out for a run or something like that, and I came back and he was like, "Are you ready?" I was like, "Ready for what?" And he was like, he had assembled everything, like he had collected all of his materials, all of his journals from that time, like his program, like he just, you know, everything that, all the artifacts of that decade. And he was like, okay, let's go through it. And so it was really that trip that he showed me everything. And it was such an act of generosity, really, because he was like, just take this is my life. But I want you to tell a story that can make people feel something about the immigrant experience, and just, you know, so he removed his ego from it. Like he kind of donated himself to the artistic cause. And so then once I had all that information, then he was like, oh, by the way, okay, you can have all this, but whatever you do, don't betray me. And I was like, okay. And then I started writing it, and I realized that the way that I was going about writing him was totally wrong because his, as you say, like the way that our dads talk is so funny and so idiosyncratic and so warm. I mean, they can be frustrating too, obviously, but there was something about the voice that I really need to capture, and it just wasn't coming through when I was writing about him. You know, like it just was sounding kind of like wounded and petulant, like I was just a kid and I still had an axe to grind and I still wanted to settle scores, and I didn't, you know, it didn't have the right tone or approach. And so once I started, like after I got all these materials, and I really kind of settled into him, and I tried writing from his perspective, and it just came out so quickly. It came out. And then every time when I needed a refresher, I would just text him, and then he would, send back this like perfect little gem of a thing. And then I would like plot out his sentences, like grammatically what it was doing. And then I like put together this dad lexicon of all of his weird idioms and all of his weird sayings. Like he always says a lots, stuff like that. It was like, and then so that was how I constructed his voice. But I really feel like he was a better storyteller. I mean, that the story came through better with him as a speaker. Sure. Yeah.
Well, and because you spent a lot of time talking and texting with your sister as well when you were doing this, what was it like learning more about your dad together that way?
Yeah, I know. It's kind of fun. I mean, in my book, I write about like the fact that we have it's kind of like this strange archaeology of our parents, because she also just like found this Google Doc that I don't know why she got a link to it, but it was just my mom's journal. So we would read that, and then like when my dad sent me the screenshots finally of his program, I would go through it with my sister, and we would like kind of psychoanalyze it together. So I mean, there's one part, I don't know if we have time to talk about this, but there's one part about the program that is just so special. Because of course he wrote it alone, and so the front page of it, he got like 100% say in how this program looked and operated. So the landing page of the program is filled with shell creatures that just kind of sea creatures that just crawl around the page. So imagine logging into like QuickBooks or something and being like,
there are clams.
They're little sea creatures crawling around this page. And I asked him, like, why did you do this? And he said, well, I was so bored. I had to do something. So when you click on these sea creatures, little messages pop up, like little command windows. And they were really, they're really kind of interesting. I don't know. So it runs a gamut, like the messages that pop up. So sometimes it's like warnings, like no one will cry with you when you weep. So be strong.
It's almost like a fortune cookie.
It is.
And for readers who have not read the book, you'll see screenshots of this in pages. Of the book. Yeah.
And so there's so many of these messages, right? Like, do not be fooled by someone's good looking. But also really lovely ones, like soon you will find your true love. There's even like lottery numbers that you could. So I was like, this is so, and so then we would like go through these messages together. You would just click, like all of the messages, and try to think what he was thinking. I mean, eventually what we came down to is like these messages were really just messages to himself, like to his subconscious. He was speaking to himself. He was trying to encourage himself. He was trying to, liven up his day.
Right.
It was like a conversation of one. So,
well, it seems like all of our definitions of bravery and having courage is very different from different perspectives. And I want to talk about your mom for a little bit here too, because I think there's a portion in your book where you have a conversation with her, and I think you end up realizing that you both have very different perspectives of what it means to clam down or to clam up. And for her, she didn't really see it as a negative experience. I think she found a lot of power, whether or not it's by design or perhaps she feels this is just a way to do things. Whereas you felt opposite. You thought the way she defined clam down is actually a weakness. What was that conversation like?
Yeah, so to her, she says, for her, the image of a clam, once I presented this framework to her, because I talked to her, and I was like, I was sharing, this new idea, and it's like, I was like, yeah, those texts you send me, I'm turning it into a thing. And so once I introduced the framework of the clam to her, she was like, to me, the clam represents extreme self-reliance, endurance, and just like getting through it, like nothing's going to bother me. I don't have to feel anything, and I'll just smile and do my job and get through it. And so for her, it was like her survival mechanism. And I don't blame her, actually, because like the pressures of an immigrant, like what she had to go through when she came to this country, and with 2 young kids and starting a whole new business and having to take care of her, my grandparents, like she was under so much stress. I can totally see how that she needed that to get through the day. And then I guess from my perspective, it was, to me, the clam at the time was representing fear, silence, distrust. I had like negative connotations of it.
Right.
So we sort of had to like hammer that out and just come to some, I think we had to just come to some mutual understanding about what it was like to be on the receiving end of her clamminess.
Well, it's amazing to sort of experience the layers you were trying to uncover as you're reading the book. And of course, we start off by learning about your separation, your own trauma. You were trying to work out and understand what was happening to you at that moment. But when you started to talk with your family, you really started to have this sense of curiosity. I mean, I, as a reader, had a sense of curiosity of like, I want to know more about your family history. But then you kind of zoom out. You start to explore the legacy of the Chinese and Taiwanese diaspora. So what was that like for you in terms of relearning or improving, or were you surprised to learn what you found ultimately?
So as I was writing, I think the structure started to emerge. That this was, so I started with the kernel of myself, right? Like I turned into a clam, and then extending it a little bit further to my immediate family, my parents, and then extending that further to my grandparents. And then, so I just kept widening the circles. So eventually it's like, you have your genealogy, but then you also have environmental concerns. So how does the environment, political, cultural, historical, like how does that shape the individual? So I really started to explore that, it starts with my grandparents, right? Like why were they so closed off, and what had they gone through during the war in Taiwan? What were the particular traumas that they had suffered that my father then inherited? I mean, he really, there's just one incredible image that came out like one day at dinner where he was like, we lost all our property after the war because of the land redistribution policies. And so he just remembered having this huge family compound at one point. And then it got sold like bit by bit by bit until he was basically living like left in the shed. Mm-hmm. They were just living. And so I was like, okay, so I can understand where that sense of insecurity comes from. It's shaped by historical factors. And then I had this really kind of wonderful, gift of a moment when I was doing research in Arco Santi in Arizona, and then someone, it's like, I don't know how common it is to see Asian women like driving around in the Southwest, but this man comes up to me and he says, oh, I know you would be really interested in Asian clams. Like, I know exactly where to go show you where these Asian clams are. And then I did more research about these Asian, they're invasive Asian clams. Just like I was doing more research about where they came from and the history. Yeah, just like how were they introduced. And the one factoid that I was so fascinated by is that it's possible that they were introduced by the first migrants, like basically the railroad workers during the gold rush. and that might have been their first introduction. So then, that just kind of made me zoom way out, where it's like the Asian clam story is not just about my immediate family, but it's also, it just spans like hundreds of years. And so I do a lot of research about what the conditions were like for these first sojourners, and how their kind of clam persona was definitely most likely informed by the hostile environment that they found themselves in.
Well, I'm just amazed that a text from your mom kind of extended to this moment of learning about the broader history of the Asian American experience here in the United States. And we're going to go on a quick break and come back to this conversation. With us today is New Haven author Anelise Chen. Her new book is Clam Down, A Metamorphosis. Join the conversation, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. Today, we're talking to New Haven author Anelise Chen. She's the author of Clam Down. So I have so many more questions, but we have so little time, so I'm going to try to get through as many as possible. But you did have a note at the end of your book where you talk about the Chinese and Taiwanese system or non-system you have of deciding whether or not you want to put the original characters in there or the anglicized version. And you say, for non-readers of Chinese, I expect when you get to the unreadable characters that there might be a sense of irritation or paralyzing or feeling paralyzed and not knowing how to proceed. And that's okay, because that feeling you have is not unlike the feeling I have when my parents text me something that I can't read. Why was it important for you to convey that feeling to readers?
I think because it's just the texture of my interactions with them. It kind of represents how, I don't know. I feel like second gen immigrant kids get this. Like, it's talking to my parents is never this seamless experience where, it's kind of funny now because I almost, anyway, there's always a sense of like friction and it's a little bit bumpy. Like, what language do we use? And sometimes when we speak too much in English, I feel that that's really weird. But then, when we're switch and we're switching and speaking in Mandarin, like I miss half the words and then I have to be like, oh, what does that mean? And then with our texting, there's really no rule either. I mean, sometimes they text me things in, using the characters, and then I have to like go to Google Translate to figure out what they're saying.
So there's a lot of figuring out on your own.
Yeah, and it's
so it goes both ways in some ways.
Yeah, because I'm sure I text them stuff and then they have to look up the word. They do, actually.
Right.
They're like, I had to look up that word. So it's never like, it's not seamless, it's all constant negotiation. And so, there's something about that I felt like exemplified just the whole relationship. Like, it is this constant negotiation. We're trying to find a middle ground, like a middle language. I guess you would call it Chinglish.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the mixing of all the languages, and suddenly you're like, what am I even speaking anymore? Yeah. And I feel like there's a lot of discovery and looking and searching in this book. And I also love your note at the end where you say this isn't exactly a memoir. Do you have a name for what you describe this genre of book? Because I think it crosses a lot of genres.
Yeah, we debated this. I guess I've landed at hybrid memoir, experimental memoir. Mm-hmm. So, my first novel was a novel that read like a memoir, and now I have a memoir that reads like a fairy tale, or reads like a fiction novel. So I think hybrid novel is going to be where I land.
And do you think this is a book about transformation or self-acceptance, or maybe a mix of the two?
I know.
I only ask very complicated questions.
I know. Oh my gosh, it's getting deep. I actually read the audiobook version of this book, and it was like I came home after a day of just a really long recording, and I said to my husband, like, oh my God, it's been 8 years and I'm still the same person. I haven't changed at all. And then he said, well, I mean, he's so cool and so calm always, and he always says the perfect thing. So he says, well, you're interested in self-acceptance and not transformation. So I think, yeah, definitely acceptance is where I've landed.
Well, and from the beginning, you were inspired by a text, and now the book is done. It's out in the world. Does Clam Down mean anything different to you?
Yeah, I definitely think that when I started the project, I had a very absolutist way of thinking about it, which is it was all or nothing. Like either you're a clam and you're totally kind of self-reliant and impervious, or you find some way out of that and you can be open and just like shameless and all sorts of other things. And I mean, our transformation stories kind of support that too. It's like, it's very black and white. Like one moment you're going to be like this, and then you're going to be another way. But I learned from writing the book that it's like a constant negotiation, like to clam or not to clam. When are the moments when you need to, when are the moments where you need to retreat, to recuperate? And when are the moments when you really need to speak up and you really need to be as brave as you can be? And
is that what you hope to leave the readers?
Just to that it's not an absolute state. I mean, I write early on in the book, even clams have to open their mouths to live.
I did make note of that.
Yeah, so it's one day, like it's a choice. Sometimes you have to, you do have to open your mouth to speak.
But it's also okay to clam up every once in a while.
Yes, it's also okay. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. You've been listening to New Haven author Anelise Chen, who is the author of Clam Down, A Metamorphosis. She's also an associate professor at Columbia University. Thank you so much for being with us today, Anelise.
Thank you.
Listeners can also find a link to the book on our website at ctpublic.org/whereweread and also ctpublic.org/wherewelive. I'm Catherine Shen. Today's show is produced by Tess Terrible. Our technical producer is Dylan Reyes. Download Where We Live anytime on your favorite podcast app. And thank you all so much for listening. 已经打动我的心，深深的一段情，叫我思念到如今。你问我爱你有多深，我爱你有几分？你去想一想，你去看一看，月亮代表我的心。你去想一想，你去看一看，月亮代表我的心。